The Galactic Deathworld Council was no place for the faint-hearted. It was a summit held once every 50 cycles, deep in neutral space, hosted by and for the apex species of the galaxy's most hostile planets, worlds classified Class 10 through Class 13. These planets featured hyper-predatory ecosystems, lethal climates, and atmospheres where only the most adaptable and terrifying life forms could survive. The Council served as a place for exchanging survival strategies, predator diplomacy, and the careful balance of territorial dominance. Until now, humans had never been considered relevant. That changed when Earth's growing interstellar presence began attracting the attention of high-tier species. Earth wasn't the most dangerous world by classification. It sat comfortably at Class 7, but its inhabitants demonstrated a pattern the Council found deeply curious. They survived in places they shouldn't. On planets where other species perished in hours, humans lived. They modified, adapted, and persisted. Worse, they thrived. This anomaly sparked interest. Some on the Council saw it as an evolutionary fluke. Others called it a challenge. After much debate, the Council voted to invite humans, not as equals, but as a novelty. The unspoken goal was to observe and belittle them, perhaps even frighten them into submission or departure. No one believed these soft-bodied bipeds from a middling death world could last more than a day among predators who killed for sport. The invitation arrived, cloaked in grandeur. A towering envoy from the Trask Dominion, a reptilian deathworlder, species with acidic blood and bone armor, descended to Earth's orbit. Humans, ever curious and diplomatic, responded with cautious optimism. The United Earth Coalition dispatched 3 delegates, each carefully selected not for brute strength but for their adaptability, insight, and poise under pressure. The team included Dr. Aisha Verma, a behavioral ecologist with experience studying Earth's most dangerous fauna and alien biospheres; Commander Eli Rourke, a former special operations strategist and survival expert; Ambassador Lena Quill, a career diplomat known for navigating volatile political environments on both Earth and its colonies. The journey to the summit took place aboard a living spacecraft bred from the nervous system of a Class 12 organism. It was a disorienting organic maze of pulsing flesh and echoing noises. The humans remained calm. They asked questions, took notes. The Trask crew grew irritated, hoping to see fear. They found fascination. Arrival at the Council station was no less intense. The summit was held on Crexus Prime, an engineered neutral world with unpredictable weather, shifting biomes, and atmospheric pressure changes designed to keep even Deathworlders alert. Council members gathered in a spiraling obsidian structure partially submerged in a toxic lake. Each species claimed its own alcove, strategically distanced to minimize predation risks. When the humans stepped onto the platform, the reaction was immediate. Laughter, a guttural growling sound in multiple languages. The Yavrith clicked mandibles in amusement. The Creel hissed mockingly from behind their obsidian veils. Many species assumed the humans would panic or be too overwhelmed by the environment to function, but the humans didn't flinch. They walked with steady steps, surveyed the terrain, and nodded politely. Dr. Verma knelt to collect a soil sample. Commander Rourke quietly mapped escape routes and blind spots. Ambassador Quill addressed the assembly in perfect, unaccented galactic standard. The room grew uneasy. Here were creatures from a so-called lesser death world, showing no fear, no posturing, just observation and analysis. They didn't puff up like the others. They didn't roar or display weapons. They were studying everyone like scientists examining a zoo. The Council didn't know it yet, but the mistake had already been made, not in inviting humans, but in assuming they were prey. The Deathworld Council had expected humans to panic or at the very least show visible discomfort. After all, the summit was designed to test even the strongest apex species. Every facet of Crexus Prime, the Council's meeting world, was meant to convey danger. The air was laced with trace neurotoxins, tolerable for most Deathworlders but potentially fatal to lesser organisms. The terrain changed hourly. The temperature shifted from freezing to blistering in minutes, and aggressive microfauna were a constant, invisible threat. But humanity didn't break. In fact, They adapted faster than any delegate expected. The three human representatives immediately began mapping patterns, terrain changes, wind shifts, animal behaviors, and even the social dynamics among other species. Dr. Aisha Verma used bioscanners and visual observation to catalog native threats. She quickly deduced that the airborne toxins interacted with the local flora to create temporary pockets of breathable air. Instead of relying on filtration systems, the humans began navigating through these clean zones with near effortless precision, something no other species had ever tried. Commander Eli Rourke ran quiet patrols of the outer perimeter. Using simple trail markers and improvised tools crafted from alien materials, he established fallback positions, blind spots, and safe zones. Unlike the other delegates who flaunted weapons, armor, and predatory strength, Rourke relied on patience, silence, and careful observation. He noticed which species avoided which others, who postured but lacked follow-through, and which parts of the terrain were manipulated for tactical advantage. Within 2 days, he had a tactical map of the entire summit area. Ambassador Lena Quill, meanwhile, made quiet inroads among the outcast species, those Deathworlders who had been pushed to the fringe of the Council by larger, louder powers. The humans didn't try to assert dominance. Instead, they built alliances through mutual respect. While the main council laughed at the humans, several minor species began supplying them with information and insight, intrigued by their calm, intelligent demeanor. Then came the first real test. A territorial dispute broke out between two rival predator species, the Yivarith, insectoid pack hunters with hive consciousness, and the Brakan, ursine juggernauts who claimed dominion over any land they walked. Their conflict was triggered over overlapping territory designations in the rotating biome sector. Essentially, the jungle area had shifted in a way that gave both factions grounds for aggression. Traditionally, these kinds of disputes ended in blood. The Council allowed them. It was considered natural behavior for Deathworlders. But the humans stepped in. Instead of trying to overpower either side, Ambassador Quill invoked an obscure section of Council law regarding neutral arbitration, a clause so outdated most forgot it existed. While the others scoffed, she called for a temporary ceasefire and proposed a challenge, not one of brute strength but of survival efficiency. Each side would be tasked with navigating a portion of the biome and retrieving a specific resource. Whichever group adapted fastest without losing members would win the claim. To everyone's shock, both sides agreed. Why? Because the humans had carefully planted the idea through days of indirect conversation, letting the predators believe it was their own solution. When the challenge took place, the humans even offered limited support as neutral observers, earning grudging respect from both factions. The dispute ended bloodlessly, a rarity in the Council's history. Now the other delegates were watching the humans not with mockery, but with wary attention. How had this lesser species not only survived but influenced apex predators without ever raising a weapon? It was then that the Council began to feel it. A shift. The humans weren't prey. They weren't predators either, not in the traditional sense. They were something else entirely. They were adapters, quiet, strategic, subtle, and they were already changing the game. By the third cycle of the Deathworld Council Summit, the humans were no longer seen as mere curiosities. They had resolved a long-standing interspecies feud without violence, navigated the dangerous terrain of Crexus Prime with uncanny precision, and earned the quiet backing of several minor Deathworld factions. This made them a threat, not in terms of raw strength but in influence. And in a council built on fear and dominance, influence was power. The Creel Dominion, one of the most feared species present, took particular offense to humanity's growing presence. The Creel were armor-plated, bipedal apex predators from a Class 13 world where the atmosphere was a swirling cocktail of acid rain, sentient fungal spores, and volcanic lightning. Their species had held a dominant voice in the Council for centuries, through a mix of intimidation and calculated shows of force. To them, the humans were an affront, soft-bodied, slow-speaking, and worst of all, respected. Unwilling to tolerate this shift in balance, the Creel devised a test for the humans under the guise of council tradition. They proposed a survival gauntlet, a ceremonial trial usually used to humble upstart species. On the surface, the humans would be required to navigate a recently activated death biome, collect a rare crystal used in council tech, and return within a standard rotation. The Creel assured all parties it was fair, but it wasn't. The entire sector had been manipulated. Terrain generators were altered to create collapsing sinkholes. Rogue predator species, native to the Creel homeworld, were illegally released into the zone. The environment was an engineered kill box. The humans knew it. Commander Rourke had already suspected sabotage. His surveillance drones picked up irregular energy spikes and signs of tampering days before the challenge was issued. Instead of refusing, or raising protest, the human team accepted the trial without hesitation, because they had a plan. When the gauntlet began, the other delegates gathered to observe. Many expected the humans to flounder, to beg for extraction, to validate the Creel's superiority. Instead, chaos erupted, but not how anyone expected. The humans entered the gauntlet equipped with nothing but their environment-adapted suits, some basic tools, and their minds. Within minutes, they triggered a series of misdirections. Rourke used seismic data to lead the pursuing predators into a natural trap, an unstable valley filled with sinkholes and predatory vines. Meanwhile, Dr. Verma released pheromone-based lures to confuse tracking species, turning the predators on each other. Lena Quill, monitoring from a secure observation post, began broadcasting a live commentary of the unfolding chaos, carefully highlighting irregularities in the terrain and implying Creel interference, without outright accusation. By the time the humans retrieved the crystal and returned, unharmed, the death biome was in shambles. Creel predators were dead or wounded. The terrain was exposed as having been altered. And worst of all for the Creel, the footage Quill had released had already reached neutral observers and allied factions. The Creel's reputation shattered in a single cycle. Infuriated and humiliated, the Creel did what predators do when cornered. They attacked. Not diplomatically, physically. A Creel war leader lunged at the human delegation in full view of the council, but he never reached them. Without drawing a weapon, Rourke stepped aside and redirected the attacker into a structural column, hard, enough to knock him unconscious. A move so precise and instinctive that it stunned the entire summit into silence. The moment the Creel fell, chaos erupted. Old rivalries flared. Accusations flew. Some species demanded justice. Others feared the humans would retaliate. Factions began posturing for conflict, and the summit teetered on the edge of collapse. But in the center of it all stood three humans, calm, composed, and very clearly still in control of the situation. And the galaxy's apex predators finally realized. They hadn't brought humans to observe them. They had invited strategists to a battlefield they didn't even know they were standing on. The Deathworld Council was unraveling. The failed Creel ambush had lit a fuse. With their predator, prestige shattered and their sabotage exposed, the Council's fragile balance of dominance began to collapse. Species that once postured under threat of violence now scrambled to realign alliances. Long-suppressed grievances between factions boiled to the surface. Amid the spiraling chaos, some began preparing for open war. Others watched for an opportunity, and at the eye of the storm stood the humans, still calm, still unarmed, and still unnervingly composed. Ambassador Lena Quill moved swiftly. As arguments escalated and minor skirmishes broke out across the summit complex, she called for an emergency arbitration session. No one expected it to succeed. The Deathworld Council had never been governed by diplomacy. It had been ruled by dominance, ritual combat, and fear. But something had changed. The humans had demonstrated that influence could outweigh intimidation, that strategy could outperform strength. Surprisingly, several lesser factions answered Quill's call. The Brakhan and Yvorith, once bitter enemies, sent representatives. So did species that had rarely spoken in council matters, emboldened by humanity's approach. They had seen something in the humans they didn't expect, not superiority, but mastery of survival in a different way. Adaptation, cooperation, and psychological insight, tools far more subtle and now far more powerful than brute force. While Quill worked the diplomatic front, Dr. Aisha Verma and Commander Eli Rourke quietly de-escalated flashpoints across the summit grounds. Verma neutralized several biohazards triggered in the wake of the Creel collapse, gaining gratitude from species affected by collateral damage. Rourke intercepted 2 assassination attempts, without killing the attackers, then turned over detailed intelligence on the provocateurs to neutral observers. Each move built a reputation, not of dominance but of competence. By the time the emergency session convened, the mood had shifted. Quill didn't ask for power. She didn't demand a seat at the high table. Instead, she proposed restructuring the council entirely. Her model was radical. Replace the outdated predator hierarchy system with a merit-based influence model. Introduce neutral arbiters to manage disputes without bloodshed. Form a rotating adaptive core of species that had proven capable of navigating threats without relying solely on force. She didn't name humanity for that role. She didn't have to. The proposal stunned the council. Some tried to resist, most vocally, the Creel, who now found themselves isolated. But when they threatened retaliation, Quill simply handed over a packet of data, unfiltered evidence of their sabotage, compiled and transmitted across several species networks. Faced with exposure, retaliation from other factions, and a loss of status they couldn't afford, the Creel retreated, and the council, shaken and fragmented, voted in favor of the restructuring. In one summit cycle, humans had gone from dismissed guests to architects of the future. When the human delegation finally departed Crexus Prime, it was not under guard or mockery, but under escort. Multiple species volunteered to accompany them off-world, offer trade, agreements, and open long-sealed research channels. Humans had proven something no one had expected, that adaptability was the highest form of strength in a galaxy ruled by predators. And perhaps most chillingly for those watching from afar, humanity never made a single overt threat they didn't conquer. They didn't coerce. They simply adapted faster than anyone else. Back on Earth, the implications were enormous. The United Earth Coalition received the news with quiet awe. For the first time in galactic history, a species from a Class 7 world had reshaped the power dynamics of the most dangerous beings in known space. The Deathworld Council would continue, but under new principles, guided by a species that had mastered the art of survival not just through teeth or claws but through strategy, restraint, and resolve. And across the stars, a single message rippled through predator space. Do not underestimate the humans, ever again.